great love for each other. Hmm? So now, at one level, we know Krishna and Arjuna's love for each other. That is legendary. But along with that, there is Arjuna's love for Bhishma. He was like a surrogate father. And after Pandu had passed away, Bhishma took him, as they say, took him in his care. And he trained him, encouraged him, appreciated him, lauded his successes. And then Krishna and Bhishma were actually the Lord and devotee. That was their relationship. So at one level, when Krishna fought against Bhishma, that was out of his love for Arjuna. But on the level, Bhishma fought against Krishna, which was also out of his love for Krishna. But the love was that he was fighting so that Krishna would demonstrate his love for Arjuna and raise his weapons. But anyway, after this happened, the next day, Bhishma fell. And when he fell on what we know is an arrow bed. Now, arrow bed, we have heard the word many times. But the arrow bed is actually in every way the opposite of a bed. You see, if we are sleeping on a bed, even if there is a small swelling on the bed, a little bit, maybe the bed sheet is a little crumpled, we try to flatten it, or we try to shift somewhere else where we can sleep. Now imagine it's just a crumple, there is a nail coming out of the bed. Now, one nail would make our life, our night hellish. But imagine the whole bed has nails coming out of it, all over. Now, most people would consider something like that to be a torture instrument, not a bed at all. And Bhishma was lying on that. He fell down. He kept fighting, although his body was pierced by arrows. He kept fighting till his body could take it no more and he fell. Even at that time, he could have ended his life. He said, I did everything now. The body is wounded. But even then, he stayed on. In one sense, he had already seen one of the most beautiful sights of his life. That of Krishna charging towards him and demonstrating to the whole world his love for his devotees. So, in many ways, the ways of love are inconceivable. One person fighting and charging towards another person. Anger can be an expression of love. When somebody gets angry when somebody else is attacked, and that shows their love. So, of course, anger is not the only expression of love. Then it doesn't seem to be at all loving. But anger is also an expression of love. And yet Bhishma was waiting for more. He had that faith that Krishna had a plan. And such was the glorious plan of Krishna. The war ended. And after the war ended, unfortunately, it did not bring joy. It was what is often called as a Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhic means a victory. It comes from Greco-Roman history. That a victory that cost so much that at the end of it, even the winners are left wondering, was this worth it? Have we lost more than what we have gained? So especially the Pandavas lost their sons. They lost Iravan, they lost Abhimanyu, they lost Ghatotkacha, and then they lost all the Pandavas. The Pandavas were left wondering, is this worth it? And for Yudhishthira especially, when he came to know that Karna was his brother, that was like the last straw. Yudhishthira started thinking, what kind of greedy person am I? That I fought a war in which I caused the death of so many people just so that I could become the king. He says, if I am so selfish and I cause such a war to just make myself the king, I am not worth being the king. And everyone tried to persuade him, but no one could. Even not only his brothers, Vyas, even Krishna himself, they tried. He said, it's not your fault. Generally speaking, there are people who are responsible and there are people who are others' responsibility. Because they are so irresponsible. Somebody they will never do anything right. So now responsible people, even if they have not committed a mistake, they often take responsibility for things. A mess has happened, somebody else made the mess, but let me fix it. On the other hand, people who are irresponsible, even when they make a mistake, it's like their tendency is that, oh, somebody else did it. What is that saying? Now, success has many parents. Failure is always born an orphan. It's like, even in our sports team, if our team wins, they say, our team won. But if our team loses, they say, they played very badly. So immediately it becomes they. So in general, we don't want to associate ourselves with any kind of negativity. But the characters of responsible people is, Yudhishthira felt, I was responsible for all this. And then, finally, the only person that could pacify him was Bhishma. So, Krishna told the Pandavas, let us go and see Bhishma. Bhishma was lying on the arrow bed. And then, Krishna told the Pandavas, you dress opulently. Normally, if we go to a funeral, there is a sober dress. Now, if somebody goes with party wear to a funeral, people will think, either you have no intelligence or, you have no heart. Means you don't know intelligence means you don't know how to dress, or heart means that you are happy that person has died. So, why would Krishna tell the Pandavas to dress opulently when Bhishma was lying on an arrow bed? Which is not his funeral, but likely to be his funeral. He was surely near death. But the point was, Krishna knew the heart of Bhishma, just as Bhishma knew the heart of Krishna. And that is the nature of love. When two people have a very close, loving relationship with each other, then even without words, they can communicate so much, just by glances, just by small gestures. But when two people don't have a loving relationship, or their love has disappeared for whatever reason, then they can scream at each other and neither person seems to understand the other person. So, where Krishna knew the heart of Bhishma and Bhishma knew the heart of Krishna. Krishna knew that why had Bhishma stayed on for so long when he could have died, he could have ended his life long ago. He stayed on because he wanted to see the Pandavas victorious. He wanted to see the Pandavas enthroned, unchallenged. The Rajasuya Yagya had been performed, but there was an immediate challenge after that. Of course, it was a fraudulent, cunning challenge where the gambling match was done to steal everything away from them. But still, the point was that Bhishma longed to see the virtuous Pandavas victorious. And Krishna wanted to give that sight to Bhishma. Therefore, he told the Pandavas, dress yourself in royal splendor. From an external perspective, it is completely inappropriate. But from the point of the heart, it was perfect. Not just perfectly appropriate, it was perfect. So here, the Pandavas came. And it's amazing as the Pandavas came and stood in front of Bhishma. If we love someone and that person is in a hospital bed with maybe all kinds of instruments strapped on them, and we know they're going to die, tears come from our eyes. And similarly, the Pandavas, they're silent, tears, they didn't even know what to speak to Bhishma. And then Bhishma spoke to them. And his very first words are amazing. He is on an arrow bed, being pierced, and he's been lying there for a long time in pain. And the first words that he speaks when somebody comes, when the Pandavas come to him. Now remember, the Pandavas are the persons who have put him in that condition. And the first words he speaks is, Aho kashtam aho anyayam yadyuyam dharma nandana. He says that Aho kashtam aho anyayam. What great difficulty have you faced? What great injustice have you faced? So there are two words in English. There is adversity and there is atrocity. Can anyone say what is the difference between the two?
Adversity is actually a difficult situation, and atrocity is somebody actually doing bad things on you.
Yes. We could say thank you. Adversity is natural, as atrocity is intentional. So which do you think is more difficult to bear?
Intentional.
Yes. In one sense, if there is no water supply in our house, maybe because there's a drought, well, it's difficult. But if, say, our neighbor deliberately cuts off the water supply just when we need it, then the anger becomes, why do you do this thing? Isn't it? So that's too small a problem to be called atrocity. But it can seem like that at times. So atrocity is where somebody deliberately does something brutal. So he's saying that, O Pandavas, you have suffered both adversity and atrocity. What was the adversity in the Pandavas' life?
They lost their father.
Yes, they lost their father, unfortunately, when they were quite small. And what were the adversities in their life?
Was why Duryodhana took away their wealth.
Yes. Duryodhana, again and again, Vipadaha Santu, again and again there's adversities. They tried to poison Bhima, they tried to burn them all alive, they tried to dishonor Draupadi and defrauded them of the entire kingdom. So he is in great distress, but the first word that Bhishma speaks is, oh, what great adversity and atrocities you have been subjected to. Yadyuyam dharmanandana. And then he says that most people would not have survived this. And then he ponders several verses, he's pondering, okay, what could have caused this? He first points out the unlikelihood of something like this happening. Because he said that all of you are so powerful. And then, as generally, whenever a person is... So what is Bhishma doing over here? Bhishma knows that Yudhishthira is burdened by guilt. But Bhishma is trying to just get Yudhishthira out of his own world. See, each one of us lives inside our head, in our own mental world. And we see things from that perspective. But he's saying that actually, Yudhishthira, you think you're suffering. And Yudhishthira at that time was especially upset with Kunti. Why was that? Yeah, Kunti knew that Karna was her son, but Kunti had concealed that. And therefore Bhishma, see, one of the... How do you know who is a good person and another who is a bad person? There are many different ways. But if two people are quarreling, bad people try to increase the quarrel. Isn't it, Two people are quarreling and the bad person says, you know what he said about you? And they goes and you know what she said about you? And like that, they just increase the quarrels. But good people, they try to build the bridges. They try to decrease. So here Bhishma is in an arrow bed. And the second and third verses that he speaks, they're all, first of all, bridge building. He says, Pandavas, you suffered, but your mother suffered even more. He says, what was her suffering? At one level, she lost her husband. And then, see, generally when we love someone, for us to suffer is bad. But for us to see our loved ones suffering and not be able to do anything to protect them, there is practically no suffering as bad as that. And for a mother to see her sons go through so much difficulty, and for her, first time when they were attempted to be burnt alive, she also went with them. They all lived in the forest till they got married to Draupadi. But the second time when the Pandavas were exiled, she wanted to come with them. But Vidura said to Yudhishthira that she's too aged, she cannot take forest life. Yudhishthira said, that's what I was also thinking, she should not come. So Vidura said, let him stay with me. Kunti said, no, I want to go with my sons. But the Pandavas and Vidura both prevailed upon her finally. So for her, she didn't even know what they were going through in the forest. So what Bhishma does is, he reminds Yudhishthira that he alone is not suffering. That there are others also suffering. Maybe the others have suffered more than him. And then he analyzes what is the cause of suffering. He says, is it destiny? What is this? Is it time? He says, is it time? Then eventually, he just, actually in one sense, he analyzes various causes of suffering, but doesn't elaborate on any of them. But eventually what he says is, Tasyanubhito Rajan. Ultimately, it is within the plan of the Lord. Now Tasya Anubhito Rajan. Now Srila Prabhupada translate that as, now everything is within Krishna's plan. Now this is different from everything is Krishna's plan. This word within is extremely important. So that means what? That when bad people do bad things, that they should do those things is not Krishna's plan. It was not that Krishna wanted Dushasana to dishonor Draupadi. The Dushasana wanted to do that, and Krishna allowed that to happen. So when things happen in the world, events that happen in this world, they can range from Krishna's intention, that Krishna wanted this to happen, to Krishna's permission. So Krishna didn't want it to happen, but that person wanted to do it, and that person insisted. So if they have the karma, Krishna lets it happen to them. Krishna lets it happen. So the point is, even when something is bad done by a bad person, it is within the plan of Krishna. That means that Krishna can bring good even through the bad. And therefore, now Anatha Pahi Nath Prabhu, he says that, oh Yudhishthira, now you see that there are so many people who are orphaned by this war. Now it is your responsibility to become the Nath, to become their protector. And there he does something. Now he's talking about it, there is something very significant. Now generally, if we are going to see somebody in a hospital who is about to die and they have a very difficult time, and they start saying that, oh, you have had such a difficult life. Actually, this is not about me, this is about you. You have had such a difficult life. But what is Bhishma doing? Bhishma is, in one sense, demonstrating his faith. See, in general, if we are devotees, if we have faith, faith has to be seen in optimism. If we are too pessimistic, that means we are not really having faith. Now, faith means that Krishna can bring a brighter future. If we are always seeing negative everywhere, this is bad and that is bad and that is bad. See, this world may be dukkhalaya, but Krishna says that he can raise us above the distress of this world. Krishna's message in the Bhagavad-Gita is not this world is dukkhalaya, so stay dukkhi. This world is a place of distress, so stay in distress. That is not at all the message of Krishna. It is, when Krishna says this world is a place of distress, what it means essentially is that distress will always be a part of our lived experience. So stop expecting a life that will be free from distress. But that does not mean that our life has to be filled with distress. So if this is our life experience, then distress will always be there in our life. Something will always be wrong somewhere. But that does not mean that distress has to be our only life experience. This is definitely not required. Now, how do we ensure that the experience of distress does not consume our life? That is by having some higher purpose to our life. When we have a purpose that is meaningful and that purpose fills our mind, then the distress becomes, not so problematic. Say, if somebody has insomnia, they're just not able to sleep. It's very irritating. It can be exhausting. It can be frustrating. But somebody, say, has a newborn baby, and to take care of the baby, they're not able to sleep. Now, sleeplessness is still difficult. But when we are caring for our baby, then the purpose of caring for our baby makes even the sleeplessness bearable. So when there is a purpose, distress becomes bearable. When there is no purpose, even a small distress can become unbearable. So what Krishna is doing, or Bhishma is doing over here, is telling Yudhishthira, you have a purpose over here. There are so many people in distress. He said, you alone are not in distress. See, Bhishma does not take an ethical approach. If you read the Mahabharata, everybody tries to argue about dharma with Yudhishthira. And says, actually it is your dharma to do this. You did not do anything wrong. You did not do anything wrong. What you did was right. But that argument just falls on deaf ears. But Bhishma takes not so much an ethical argument as more of a human argument. That distress is there for everyone in this world. You yourself have suffered distress. Your mother has suffered great distress. There are so many people right now in distress. What can you do about it? Is there is a purpose for you. Even Yudhishthira knew that all the Pandavas are virtuous, he was the most virtuous. So if there was relief to be provided for all those who were victimized by the war, Yudhishthira was the best person to do that. And then Bhishma says that tasya tathapekanta bhakteshu pasya bhupanukampitam yanme syustajata sakshat krishno darshanamagataha. He says, I'll give you an example. He says that I went through great difficulties in my life. I had to do bad things. But through it all, I remained devoted to the Lord. So Yudhishthira is feeling that I did terrible things. Which implies that I also had to do terrible things. But I remained faithful to the Lord. I remained devoted to the Lord. And the result of that was, now the Lord has come before me to give me his darshan. Sakshat Krishno darshanamagataha. He's come to give me his darshan so that my last moment will be successful. So what is he saying through this? He's saying that if we just do our part, we all have a part to play. We do our part in a mood of service to Krishna, Krishna will save us. Krishna will take us to a better place. Krishna will deliver us. And he gives his own example of how he was delivered. And this is what convinces Yudhishthira. The argument is actually very deep. It's when somebody is in suffering and they feel, I have caused the suffering. Then to tell him, no, no, what you did was not wrong, what you did not cause the suffering, something else caused. And that just doesn't work. When somebody's heart is afflicted by the thought that I caused the suffering, what can actually help them at that time is that they can cure the suffering, that they can fix the situation. That's what pacifies them. And this is how Bhishma then pacified Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira then asked him question, okay, what is Raj Dharma? What is the duty of a king? And then Bhishma spoke elaborately. In fact, those instructions which are in the Shanti Parva and Anushasan Parva of the Mahabharata, they're huge. And political administration, social administration, cultural administration, all these can be learned. Timeless principles for those things can be learned from those sections. And then finally came the time when Bhishma decided it was time for him to depart. So the sun went into the Uttarayan came basically. Now Bhishma could have departed at any time and his departure would have still been auspicious. But Bhishma wanted to demonstrate how those who are devoted to the Lord are successful. Now, see, in every situation, success is defined differently by different people. Some people may define success in terms of how much wealth they get. Some people may define success in terms of how much popularity they have. Some people may define success in terms of how deep their relationships are. Different people may define success in different ways. Now Bhishma, by departing in Krishna's presence, was already successful in devotional terms. But not everybody over there was a devotee. So in the general Vedic context, there was an understanding that if people die at a particular time, that's auspicious. If people die at some other times, that's considered inauspicious. So Bhishma wanted to demonstrate that even from that mundane pious perspective, a devotee would depart auspiciously. And therefore he waited till Uttarayan came. And then the Bhagavatam uses this beautiful phrase, that person who had fought hundreds of wars and who had spoken on hundreds of subjects, then fell silent. And then after pausing, then he turned toward Krishna. Till then, he had been speaking to Yudhishthira in Krishna's presence. But now he turned to Krishna. And then he started praying to Krishna. And those last prayers that Bhishma offers are among the most beautiful prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's interesting, Krishna is right in front of him. He's turned toward Krishna. But he's offering prayers to Krishna not in the second person, but in the third person. That is, I is the first person, you are the second person, and he, she, they are the third person. So he's offering prayers to Krishna in Krishna's presence, but he's offering prayers in the third person. And the reason for that is that personally he knows this Krishna is the Lord. But Krishna wants Bhishma to demonstrate the perfect departure according to yogic standards. And for that purpose, Bhishma is offering prayers in the mood of a yogi. Now, mostly the yogis don't get to see the Lord. They see the Lord in their heart. Dhyana vastadgatena manasa pashyantiyam yogina. So he's offering prayers from that perspective. The Lord is there in front of him, but the Lord is within the heart. That Lord who is not perceivable, but that Lord is being approached through prayers. So he offers prayers, but they are eminently personal prayers. And this is the first time in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in Bhishma's prayers, that there is a reference to the gopis. Now there is a reference to the word gopi in Kunti's prayers. But that is referring to Kopya Dade. That was refers to Yashoda. But here, he refers to the gopis of Vrindavan, or the younger gopis. And what does he remember about the gopis? That unmadandha, that they just became mad with love for Krishna when Krishna had departed, leaving them in the forest. And they were asking everyone. So now, he doesn't remember the Ras Leela when they were dancing together. He doesn't remember Krishna playing the flute on all the gopis around them. Just remembering that the gopis were mad in separation from Krishna. Because that is the mood of the highest love. That is the mood in which Bhishma himself had to serve. There are very few actual meetings and long discussions between Bhishma and Krishna in the Mahabharata. That just their roles in society were such that they didn't have any long interactions. But their hearts were bound together. So Bhishma is remembering that mood of love and separation. And then finally, he remembers that classic incident when Krishna comes charging towards him to kill him. And he says that Vijaya Sakhe Ratirastu Menavadya, that may that Lord who is Sakha of Vijay, of Partha, always be on the path of my eyes, always be in front of me. And then finally, he says that I offer my heart, my life, my everything to you. And he says that Lord who is within, who is without, who is everywhere, he is my everything. I surrender to him. I give myself to him. And saying this, he becomes silent. And there's a moment of silence when he is departed from the world. And then there is celebration. While he has died, he has attained the most glorious success. By dying in Krishna's presence, by fulfilling Krishna's purpose even in the last moments of his life, when he was pacifying Yudhishthir, by glorifying Krishna till his last moment, he demonstrated the perfect departure from the world. So that Bhishma who performed many austerities throughout his life, that Bhishma who during the course of his life performed 5-day austerity that became celebrated as Bhishma Panchak, all his austerities were rewarded ultimately by Krishna arranging the perfect departure for him. And Bhishma's life story shows that in this world, nobody is spared. Even good people have bad things happening to them, and sometimes it's good people end up doing things which are not good also. But Krishna sees beyond all that. Krishna sees the heart and he values the heart. If bad things are done, sometimes there are consequences of those bad things. But Krishna's love and Krishna's appreciation goes beyond those bad things. He sees beyond the action and the consequences to the heart, and he reclaims the heart of that person. So that is the example of Bhishma. His principles led him to choose the wrong side. But Krishna saw that ultimately his heart was in the right place. He might have been fighting on the wrong side, his heart was in the right place. Now Krishna knew that, but it was just like Bhishma wanted, I'll conclude with this point, it's like Bhishma wanted the world to know how much Krishna loved Arjuna. And that's why Bhishma fought against Krishna, or Arjuna rather. So similarly, Krishna wanted the world to know how glorious Bhishma was. And that is why Krishna came with the Pandavas to Bhishma. Now everybody respected Bhishma as a great warrior, but people could have thought, he was on the losing side. Anyway, he was killed and he fell in the battlefield, and he was on the side of wise. But he might have been all this. But Krishna wanted him to demonstrate that Krishna is the Dharma Gop, he is the giver of Dharma. Yudhishthir is Dharmaraj. And yet both of them came to Bhishma to learn about Dharma. So in this way, Krishna offered the greatest glorification for Bhishma, not just in the mode of his departure, not just from within his heart by his appreciation, but within the world Krishna wanted Bhishma's glories to be demonstrated. Such is the nature of the Lord. So on that Kurukshetra battlefield, where there fierce wars, there was also a fierce love that was demonstrated. Generally we think of love as tender, but love can take many forms. We sometimes use the word tough love, but for Bhishma and Krishna it was fierce love. Fierce love. It was Bhishma through his ferocity showed his love for Krishna. Krishna through his ferocity showed his love for Bhishma. And finally, it was that fierce love that culminated in a glorious departure and the ultimate success for Bhishma. Such is the character in whose honor we observe Bhishma Panchak. And such are the characters who fill the firmament of the Vedic sky, and we all can take inspiration from them and enrich our hearts and our lives. I'll summarize. We discussed over the life and character of Bhishma. We started first by talking about his vows, and that connection we discussed the genealogy to understand what role he had to play. Then the main focus we had was on mainly 3 incidents. One was about Bhishma's fall. How that was an expression of love. That he fell by fighting so furiously that Krishna had to raise his weapons. And then when Krishna was ready to kill him, he was ready to immediately die. But he lived on. He said, through the genealogy, we discussed that primarily talk about the fact that he had got Ichha Mrityu, but he did not take it. Although bad things happened around him, bad things happened to the people who loved him, bad things happened through him, bad things happened through him to the people who loved him, whom he loved. And yet he continued on because he had faith that Krishna had a bigger plan. And it was that bigger plan that was eventually revealed. So then we discussed about how the Bhishma Yudhishthir conversation. That is the third part. How the way Bhishma pacified and pursued Yudhishthir was just by turning the tables around. So he empathized, oh, I am sorry I caused you so much suffering. Bhishma says, oh, you have been through so much suffering. And basically don't get caught in analyzing what caused the suffering. So focus on the fact that the suffering can be cured and cure it. It is the Lord's plan and you play your part in the Lord's plan. And in that way, he pacified Yudhishthira. And then Yudhishthira sought instruction on dharma. And finally was the Bhishma Krishna interactions, where Krishna wanted Bhishma to be glorified, and therefore Krishna arranged for himself to be present at the time of Bhishma's departure and Bhishma's glory to be revealed to the whole world for all time to come. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you for the amazing class and glorifying Bhismadev. So, as we know, Bhismadev was one of the Vasus in the previous life, and he had to take birth again. All the others 6, 7 were delivered, 8 wasn't, so he had to stay. So, and the way he departed also, that's usually the Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they depart like that. In chapter 8 of Bhagavad-Gita, it is explained. So for him, he was a Kevala Bhakta. So for him, he departed, and usually Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they go the spiritual world and Shantara. So for him, destination was obviously spiritual world, right? But where and what now?
See, there is those same incidents to some extent are described in the Mahabharata and they are also described in the Bhagavatam. And when they are described in these two places, they are described from different perspectives. That means that in the Mahabharata, the primary perspective is the Karma Kanda perspective. Karma Kanda perspective means that you do good at the material level and you will get good at the material level, either in this world or in the heavenly worlds. Now the Bhagavatam talks from the Bhakti perspective. Now both perspectives have validity. Now overall the mood of Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita is that you can yourself be following a higher path, but don't disturb those who are following a lower path, because the lower path will also lead to elevation. Like the lower path will be, it's a gradual elevation. Bhakti path is like a rapid elevation. But not everybody is capable of following the path of Bhakti. And therefore, even those who are following a higher path need to set an example of dutifulness for those who are following the lower path. Krishna tells Arjuna, you can renounce the world and your renunciation could be genuine. But taking your example, many others may renounce the world and they may not be genuine. So now, of course, Krishna is not criticizing renunciation here. But specifically, if somebody is renouncing a duty, when that duty becomes difficult. Like Arjuna has to fight a war, and when that war involves fighting against his relatives, so I can't do it. He renounces. He says that will become an excuse for others to give up their duties. So the whole mood is that while bhakti is emphasized, but karma kanda is not trivialized. It is also valued. So that is the overall mood of the scriptures. So that mood is seen especially in the Bhagavad-Gita, but that's all overall there also. So Bhishma's success is spectacular at a bhakti level. But even from the karma kanda level, somebody does ritualistic religion and then at the end of their life they renounce the world. They get dharma, artha, kama, then they move toward moksha. So from that perspective also Bhishma's success was there. So it is more like that was demonstrated to set an example for the rest of society. Now where did he go? Vishwanath Thakur explains, it's primarily for Krishna Lila, but that can apply here also. He says that many of the associates of the Lord, intimate associates of the Lord, they have two distinct manifestations getting united. That means that, say, now who according to the Bhagavad, who according to general understanding are Yashoda, are Senan, are Vasudeva and Devaki. They are they're devotees, of course. But they are also, the Bhagavatam says, they had performed austerities in their previous lives. Prishni and Sutapa. So now if you consider, and then the Droni and Dhara? Droni and Dhara, yeah. Now he explains that actually, that Vasudeva and Devaki or Yashoda and Nanda, they are residents coming from the spiritual world, eternal associates of the Lord. But in special situations, there are souls who want to serve Krishna in that same rasa. So when those eternal associates descend to this world, these souls who have performed austerities, they also enter into their bodies. They get lodged into their bodies. And they experience that exalted love through that situation. And when that particular lila is over, then Yashoda and Devaki, or Yashoda and Nanda, or Vasudeva and Devaki, they will go back to the spiritual world, and those souls will go back to their particulars. And they'll continue on their spiritual journey. Maybe they'll get elevated by that also. So basically in Bhishma, we have Bhishma as the same, by the same reasoning, because Bhishma is an eternal associate of the Lord. He went back to the spiritual world. But that Amsha, that Vasu, he went back to the heavens. Okay.
So usually Bhismadev, is he in the Vaikuntha planets or is he in Dwarka or is he in, because being the Kshatriya, he loved that form of the Lord fighting spirits? Or
That's a good question. I haven't seen anything clear in the Bhagavad-Gita as of now. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if I remember right, in one place that the Pandavas are in Dwarka. So the Pandavas in Dwarka, I would say Bhishma would also be in Dwarka with the extension.
that's what I thought, but yeah, I just wanted to show.
Yes.
In that conversation that you were describing between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Bhishma, right? You were saying that Yudhishthira Maharaj was he was not happy with not with the outcome, but the whole thing about the war, that why it happened and so many people got killed, and he was very self-critical about that he was the reason for it. So how do we define, or where do we draw the line between being self-critical and humble? And where are both best applied in practical life?
So where do we draw the line between being self-critical and being humble? The key thing is that humility is not the supreme virtue. It is a very important virtue, but the supreme virtue is service attitude. We are parts of God and we are meant to serve God. We are meant to play our parts in God's plan. So humility is meant to ensure that our ego doesn't come in the way of our service. But it is our service that is important. So if somebody has a very big ego, then unless they get a particular level of facility, particular level of prestige, they will not do this service. No, the service is more important. But at the same time, when we are trying to serve, sometimes the service may be best done when there is a particular level of respect. Say for example, if say Prabhupada was trying to share Krishna Bhakti in India and it was just not working. Now Prabhupada could have been humble and said, maybe it's not Krishna's plan that I should preach. Maybe I don't have enough purity to preach. And Prabhupada could have said that and just let himself. Prabhupada, in this context, Prabhupada could say, I'll be self-critical, I have a lot of faults, maybe that's why it's not happening. Now, it's significant that the Prabhupada did consider that. Prabhupada went to Vrindavan and he chanted and he dove himself into the shelter of the Vrajavas, of the Goswamis in Vrindavan. But eventually, Prabhupada looked for some practical reason for the lack of effectiveness and he came with a practical solution. The practical reason he felt was that Indians were highly infatuated with the West. And then he decided a practical solution is, let's go to the West and inspire Western people. Now you could say that was, most people would have considered to be a harebrained plan. It's like, you can't persuade Indians about their tradition, how are you going to persuade Americans? It's like, you can't lift a 5 kg weight, so let's lift a 50 kg weight. It would seem like that. But Prabhupada didn't let that stop him from going. So his humility did not let him, it will not come in the way of his service. So now if you consider when he went to America, in India at least he was respected as sadhu. He could go, if he would go to anybody's house, they would honor him and they would give him food and they would give him respect as sadhu. When Prabhupada went to America, and especially went into the place where the counterculture was, the hippies were living in the Lower East Side, they didn't offer him any respect. They thought he's just a strange old man. Maybe he has some nice ideas, but they had no idea about how to offer respect to him also. So Prabhupada would cook food for them. And they would think it's just a hotel. So they would eat the food and just walk away. And Prabhupada would wash their plates. And then And when they started living with Prabhupada, because they started becoming slightly attached to Prabhupada, even then they didn't understand. So when Prabhupada, in the morning they had to use the restroom, Prabhupada would stand in the queue, waiting. So now, all this, he could have said, I was a sannyasi. They're not offering respect to me. But Prabhupada didn't care for that, because Prabhupada saw that they had some spiritual interest. They had some spark of spiritual interest, so he was ready to focus on that. So the point was, if the service was available, then even if respect is not there, that's okay. But if, say, Indians will think, oh, this is just our own culture, we know Krishna, we know all this. So there was, in one sense, some respect of sadhu was there. But there was no service available for Prabhupada in India. So Prabhupada went away from there. So the important thing is, how can I best serve? If we keep that question in mind, then we will see, when do I need to be self-critical? And we cultivate humility by that. Or when do I need to be analytical or objectively analytical about the external world and try to make a change over there so that I can be more effective. So it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of each individual, how can they best serve. Okay?
Just on that, at the same time, we, like, because of our own anarthas, sometimes we feel unqualified and we feel, what am I, what do we do in that situation, in our service? I mean, yes, we're doing our service, but at the same time, due to our anarthas, we feel sometimes it's a never-ending it's like,
I feel unqualified to answer this question. Okay. No, there are two different things over here. See, we don't have to be qualified to serve Krishna. We just have to have the desire to serve Krishna. And once the desire to serve Krishna itself is our first qualification. Now beyond that, for specific services, we can try to acquire specific qualifications. That's fair enough. But the important thing is that the desire itself is the most important qualification. And sometimes what happens is, has any of you heard this statement? Is it?
I can relate to that too.
Yeah. Now what happens is, when we make this statement, it is, I am a fallen. This fallen becomes so big that the soul becomes forgotten. So now we have to remember that in bhakti means sarvopadhi vinirmuktam. We need to go beyond all temporary designations. So just as I may think I am wealthy, I am powerful, I am popular, these are temporary designations. Temporary designations. So even fallen is a temporary designation. We shouldn't identify more with the fallen part than the soul part. I may be fallen, but I am a soul and I am a part of Krishna. So if we over-identify with the fallen part, then we are actually in Maya. In thinking that I am so fallen, that we are actually falling further into Maya. Because now we are, not acknowledging that I am fallen, that is Maya, no doubt. But to think that fallen defines my entire condition. No, fallen is the conditioning around me, the soul. I need to acknowledge that, but I just as we don't want to identify with our bodily condition, we don't have to identify even with our fallen condition. Because both are temporary, both are a product of Maya, and we need to go beyond both. So yes, if we are unqualified in some way, we try to acquire the necessary qualifications to whatever extent we can. But we don't have to let the lack of qualification stop our service. Okay. Yes, please.
Probably yogis, like, they do so many austerities and they purify their senses and then they're able to see the Lord, the Paramatma within the heart, but they're still not attached to the devotion service. But on the other side, devotees, maybe they never see the Krishna for the whole of the life, and but they still are attached to the devotion service. So why? Can you please explain? Because ultimate devotees also want to see the Lord, but they maybe for the whole of the life they can't see. But at the same time, the yogi who already see the Paramatma within the heart, but he is still not attached to the devotion service.
Okay. I'm not attached to your question. Ye thamam prapadyante tam sathaiva vajamya. Krishna reveals himself to people according to how they approach him. So the ultimate reality, the absolute truth, can be seen in various ways. Could be seen as the object of meditation. He can also be seen as a person for reciprocation. And these two are very different visions. Object for meditation means that, okay, I want to meditate, and that is the ultimate reality. Let me meditate on that. So now, if that's how a person is saying, oh, all the objects in this world are temporary, there is one object that is unchanging, let me meditate on that. Then here, their focus is not so much on reciprocating with the Lord. It's more on meditating. So it's in one sense much more of a passive method. So yogic path is also very inactive. Mauna vrata, nishkriya. That is the idea. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. You just want to stop all the movements of consciousness so that everything becomes silent. But in bhakti, we want the movements of consciousness. The movement, not just the movement, but the racing of consciousness toward Krishna. So that is a very different vision of the liberated life and of the supreme reality. So now here it's not just active, it is divinely active, it is ecstatic. Ecstatically active, you can say. So because it is this way, there is a very different flavor in the relationship. So devotees may never see the Lord, but their mood see, of course devotees also see the Lord, but even if they don't see, then their mood is of loving and serving. It's a very active mood. And the Lord reveals himself accordingly. Because the yogis have a very different mood, so they see the Lord that way. And even if they come to know about Bhagavan, unless they get to associate with devotees who are completely in love with Bhagavan, they just feel, okay, that's what you are attracted to, but this is what I'm attracted to. So they don't change their preferences so much. That's why there is no such thing as a Paramatma Loka in the spiritual world. Those who meditate on the Paramatma, they can either go upward toward Bhagavan or they can go downward toward Brahman. Those who meditate lifelong on the Paramatma, if is the object of meditation. But what is the objective of meditation? Okay, you are meditating on that object, but what is the purpose? What is the end result? What is the objective of that meditation? If their objective becomes to unite, in the sense of merge with that Lord, then they go to the Brahman level. If their objective is to serve that Lord, then they go to the Bhagavan level. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Last question. Okay, we have some more questions. Yeah.
Just one question. It was a nice lecture. As Prabhuji said, the yogis are having a different path and the devotion services on different path. I want to ask you, as Ramchandra Lord incarnated and the yogis in that instance when the Lord visited to the yogis, and those same yogis become the gopis, next birth when the Krishna comes as incarnation of Krishna. So I was feeling like I want to know like how the yogis differentiate in the passive way, and they transform their love to become the gopis. How it intensify from that level to that level.
Yeah, so when Sita, Ram, Lakshman were in the forest, and the yogis in the forest, the rishis, they saw the beautiful pastime of Lord Ram, especially with Sita and with his devotees. They were attracted, they were charmed, and they wanted to have similar relationship with the Lord. So that can happen because of that personal association with the Lord. The Bhagavatam also describes that how the Kumaras went to Vaikuntha. They were from the impersonal path, but then Kinjal Kamishra Tulsi Makarandavayu, and when the wind flowing from the Tulsi on the lotus feet of the Lord entered into their nostrils, Samshobham Aksharajusham Apichittatarvo, it agitated them and it elevated them through their agitation. So either they have to have association of the Lord, so association of devotees, or they have to have association of the Lord interacting with devotees, or just the Lord's beauty. Now that's how the rishis, because they saw these pastimes, this loving relation, loving interactions are so endearing that we want to be a part of it. And how do they become part of it? By coming in the next time as the gopis. So it was the association of the Lord that led to that. Okay. Thank you. So thank you very much. Shri Bhishma Pitamaha ki jai. Bhishma Panchak ki jai. Kartik Maas ki jai. Krishna Bhagwan ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Prema.